Right, this is going to be the pilot episode of a brand new show on the Last Free Nation Network, which is going to be called Hot Take Point Made League Edition. As in, I did one for CS, and it's a popular format, as I'll explain to you in a moment. And so we're going to do one for League of Legends, because I think it's a game that's actually wide open for it. Although, that will be part of my preamble now, which is that it was tricky to set up the right people. Because basically, Hot Take Point Made is a show that in Counter-Strike, the genesis was Maui Snake, who's a guy who's sort of like my protege as an analyst, if people don't know. On a desk, he isn't someone who was a pro player, he was only a semi-pro, and he sort of built his brand around having like hot takes and bold narratives and being willing to sort of go against the sort of pro meta where you're supposed to be polite to them in every way and tell them they're all gods because they're pros, etc. He's sort of doing my style, the iconoclastic style. So I already knew me and him should do a show like that anyway. And what we realised was, in CS, believe it or not, even though it's known as a way edgier game on the desk, etc., compared to obviously League and Valorant, even so, there are a lot of people who are the top name desk analysts in that game who actually play it very safe now. They're actually quite scared of like backlash from fans or people saying like, oh, you're just always trying to come up with the craziest takes, man, for attention. So I thought, why don't we do it? And you guys will appreciate this. Like in League of Legends, when we all watch LCK finals and they have that designated trash talk segment where you just know 1 second before they hit roll on the camera, they tell some guy who'd never trash talk, like, you know, Deft or something like that, like, Deft, you need to do what your fans expected. Like, you have to find a way to tell them the Faker sucks. And he has to be like, Faker, we went to school together once, and now I'm going to take you to school. Like some bad, like, Arnold from the 80s line of a scriptwriter. But we all love it because we all know they're allowed to talk trash in that segment. It's encouraged, isn't it? We want them to get as spicy as they can. So I thought what we'd do is, in CS, I wanted anyway, people who are analysts to have a space they could come to where it's a safe area, but to be as outrageous as you want. Like, the joke goes, instead of just doing a normal hot take, like, for example, say my hot take, and an obvious one would be, I'll use an actual player hot take. The hot take wouldn't have been, hey, Mad Lions in winter aren't just good, that Super's the best bot lane in the entire world. I mean, he did that hot take, not me. That was a real hot take from him. Like, that's a hell of a hot take, because the idea is you don't just make it sexy, make it as sexy as possible. So I thought for League, the tricky thing, because everyone has always asked me, would I ever do this show? The trickiest part is it's almost impossible to get a lineup of people like I have in CS, because in CS there's me, and I can already do that anyway. Maui does it a bit anyway, and then we have Kassad, who's a guy who was a coach and a former like semi-pro, and his whole thing is more like, but it's he's more there to be the grounding element, like as in his response to almost every hot take is, are you insane? Because like his brain forgets it's a hot take and thinks like, well, that would never happen. It's like, well, yeah, no shit, it's a hot take show. But as Kiru will know, someone who watches it, that is half the dynamic that makes that show fucking amazing. So I thought we've got a similar setup. We've got me, I'm still the alchemical transmutative force within this magical equation. We've got Kire, who can be the Maui Snake figure now. Obviously, if you don't know, he comes from my Discord originally, like for reals. There's not like he had a career and then he went there. He just came from my Discord, did some shows with me, does them rich, and somehow it's like parlayed that into like a mini media career, just being someone who can say things only someone on a Discord can. And then I thought Zabatine obviously can be the figure to go politely, may I ask if you are in fact insane? He could, he could play that role, couldn't he? He's the guy with the industry chops. He has more to lose than we do, Kire. We're probably going to be talking shit about friends of his, people he's worked with, maybe even people who represent. Who the fuck knows? So anyway, but the last joke would obviously be to begin. With that said, he actually believed Iker was an LCS level pro worth being paid tens of thousands of dollars. So he believes in hot takes. See what I did there?
Wow, we start like this.
It's all good. Okay. Listen. Okay. There's also on this show, it's an open show. You're allowed to take shots at people too. You're allowed to, because here's the other thing, just to say at the outset, we're not all here to agree. Like, by the way, if you actually come up with a fire hot take, I do agree with that. I'll double down with you. But it's totally encouraged. People can go back and forth and you can think it's a ridiculous take if you want. So here's my question though. I purposely made it so we don't know each other's takes. Who has a hot take to start with? Who wants to get the ball rolling? Who's got something in the chamber that could be good to start with? You, Zabatine, you look like you're ready to volunteer.
I mean, I have some. I just feel like
hit me with one.
Dynamic. Okay. I'm gonna start with something that's pretty. I would say it's not that hot. It's like EUS level has always been bad.
Okay.
I think people have a very hard time remembering what EU was in the past. And the only reason people kind of praise the past of EU is because China wasn't great back then. It was kind of a failure. 2015, 2016, up to 2018, no Chinese team was consistently good internationally.
Sure.
So people all have this kind of like dreamy memory of like, oh, you remember when, you know, Betsy was like a top world mid laner.
Okay.
And, you know, I don't know, like Mimer and Zoro were like
Right,
the best
sure.
players in the world.
Sure.
So I kind of feel like it's a good take to start with because, you know, everybody coming this year and it's like, oh my God, man, LEC is so bad this year. It's like, it was the same last year, it was the same the year before. So I want to start with that.
Oh, so we don't mean just like the actual... Is it a mixture of people nostalgically remember solo queue as being better than it was? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying like the competitive level of the region
Right.
EU
Okay.
is way worse historically than what people pretend it was.
Right, okay.
So they're like, oh, 2023, 2024 have been pretty rough for the level in Europe. Has always been, man. Always been this level.
Okay.
Like always this lukewarm, pretty bad macro, pretty lukewarm individuals all across the board trying to play together with no real construction of the rosters. And if you remember, like the top players back then, they were like Power of Evil that had a pretty good career, right? But never been like shining on the international stage aside from the quarterfinal against SKT. So my take is that I think EUS level has never gone worse. It just got always at this level, at the current level, which is fairly bad in comparison to China and Korea.
Okay. What do you think of that, Kira?
See, it's not that hot because I agree, bro. I had to go through the fucking bollocks, right? Okay, of season 3, like of people telling me that Xpeke was the best, like a candidate for the best mid laner in the world because everyone had like been watching LCK with their eyes closed and all that. You know what I mean? And then Daddy had his failures, and the Ozone team exploded, and Gambit helped that. But like, I don't care that like Gambit aren't a better team than that Ozone team in season 3. Just Worlds like recolored it, and so. Yeah, the thing is what I think really helps like EU is a lot of the top tier teams, they were filled with like players that are really clutch. Like, and I actually think that like helped them really colour the nature of like the league. Like the Gambit guys were pretty clutch, Xpeke and Soaz were extremely clutch, and they got 2 runs of it in Fnatic and Origin. Caps Caps is super clutch, and obviously you've got Perks, who's Omega, like silly levels of clutch ability. So I think that really helps it, because one thing that everyone can always forget is everyone always thinks like player skill correlates directly to being clutch. It's like, for example, like Uzi's horrendously not clutch. His actual finals make Uzi's head like blow off his like shoulders. So and like I do actually like see that, and when you see a lot of the upsets, it's kind of funny how they're often like correlated with the EU team not standing a chance, and then them like winning and like dramatic. It's almost like a saga could always be written between it. And the other thing about it is I feel like EU is so self-deprecating as well. Like EU picked up some of that like that NA thing of like when it does go to like shit, they are just like, yeah, we really are just that bad. They don't kind of hit like that because there's no singular nation. You've not got like that nationalism of like China and Korea. Like EU is very quick to accept that maybe the 3 teams we've sent are just utter dog shit.
No, I think, yeah, go on.
Yeah, go on, Thorin.
Basically, I would say I agree in general. Like, I know what you mean. It's actually not that crazy a hot take if someone knows the history of the region, because essentially, here's the point, Sabatine. Think about the discussion NA teams were trying to do last year with NRG and G2. They were going like, oh, maybe we are better than EU now because G2 lost that one series. Like, you're just a one-team region. It's like, bro, we always have been. What are you talking about? We've basically had like G2 super teams, a couple of Fnatic teams a long, long time ago, and that's about it. Whoever the best EU team is can sometimes compete with like almost the best Asian teams. The real problem is you got to look at the other end of the qualification. Who are we sending last? Our 3rd and 4th seeds for these last 3 or 4 years aren't very good teams, guys. Like these teams aren't on paper to beat like a D+ or a KT. Like no one expects it even. So yeah, I agree with you overall. I think essentially, and I'll tie it into what Kira said, I think it's even worse than that. I actually think what we've done, and this is really stupid, is we've just rode the coattails of the genius players. Like, if I tell you these 4 players, guys, these 4 players account for something mental, like 95% of Western results in the whole history of League of Legends. Caps, Perks, Xmithie, and Jensen. That's like every single one right there. There are only 4 players I put there. 3 of them are fucking mid laners. Like, if we take those players out, which, by the way, those would be the outliers. They're the bizarrely, like, clutch players. They're always in the big game. They had periods in their career when they're excellent. You take those players out, and you take it to, like, what you're saying, Sabatine. So, in fact, the actual talent of Europe would be like a Vizzy. It wouldn't be Wonder, it'd be Vizicachi. That's the pattern player. Wonder's the outlier, mate. We've never had a player that good. If you take out Jensen and you go Power of Evil, that's more reasonable. That's a player that could be on the brink of getting out of groups, probably wouldn't. If you go instead of like fucking, who would they even say for it? I guess they'd say Perks in G2. If you go instead Handsama, or you go with someone else who's just pretty good, again, these are good players, but even those players shouldn't be at the level of Ruler, fucking Knight, Bin. These players are on another level. So I sort of agree. I actually think it's why half of the NA-EU shit was the distraction, because all it really was best NA team versus best EU team. We never really even doing region on region. You're sort of right, Zabatine. It's an outlier for a Western team to even be good, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at like 2015 Worlds, which is like historically one of the, kind of
best,
like a fond memories of the West. It was like Cloud9 made it out of a group, 2 EU teams in semifinals. Seed 2 of Europe was H2K, Odo Amne, Lulex, Ryu, Kiernan, and Kassing. None of these players, like aside from Odo, right, who had a pretty tremendous career, and Ryu, who was an import and had a decent career in NA. It's not legacy players, and that was like the second seed that we had, right? And there was obviously Origin that qualified, that had all these amazing players that went in semifinals and stuff. But if you really look at the density of the region, I think that what we have currently with G2 being the best, and then having the runner-up, which is always Fnatic for some reason, no matter who they align with Humanoid, it's always Humanoid's team that goes to Worlds. And then you have the third team that usually just goes on holiday for like 3 weeks for the group stage and just gets slammed by Asian teams. I don't feel like the density has gone worse. I don't think the level of play has gone worse. And I think it's just a kind of a reaction to the moment of saying, oh, man, what have we done? Nothing. We are just consistently at the level we've been. And the only difference that makes us feel worse is the ascent of China, that became much better of a region over the years, much more consistent. Now they have a plethora of like solid mids, solid junglers, solid top laners, and they're just able to produce like top teams. Whereas I think Europe is always with the same density. Like as you said, aside if you put Caps aside from the history of EU, we're not very far from NA. It's like this guy kind of pull on his back, the weight of the region.
No, by the way, the reason why I bring that up as well, Zabate, I think it's a very valid point, is because, bro, no one does this when we look at the other regions. So everyone else was cool with LMS stopping being a major region. Remember that, right? Even though, by the way, MSI especially, they have an unbelievable record historically. Like, they're beating Koreans, like, something mad, like 15 games or something over Worlds and MSIs. Like, more than Westerners have ever beaten them, by the way, even G2. But you ever go back, if I asked a fan, Zabatine, was LMS Taiwan region any good? They'd go, no, they were just carried by that generation of talents, weren't they? Karsa, Maple and Sword. I'd say, we're doing the same thing, guys. We're just taking Caps and Perks and the super stud players. Because, like, here's the thing. I'm a fan of Larson. Larson wouldn't have had the career Caps did, even in the same lineups. Like, these are... that's why those players are the outlier even to the region. I agree. I think we're actually unfair in that one. Okay, not a bad one. That was a good one there, because what he managed to do there, Kieran, was we didn't have to disagree with him, but it also was a hot take. So that one was just against the fans, which, I'm always up for bashing on the fans. Don't worry about that. Do you have one, Kieran? Do you have a spicy hot take to start with?
Thorin, I never realised what this show was going to have to make me do. First of all, I've now got to read more League Twitter, which is bad, right? And then now to get community sentiment, I've got to log into Reddit to get fan consensus. And I notice whenever Caps is the best player, you don't even need to watch the games, because someone will fucking tell you about it, right? Even if he isn't, by the way, okay? Doesn't matter. People, that's just the default answer of Europe, and it's too safe. And I'm going to die in this hill. My one passion in life is Larson as the successor to the middle of the throne. But when I'm on a bit of a spicer one, there's a second name.
No, it's not Jackie's, please.
No,
don't do it.
I think Humanoid had been the best player in the season finals, right? By a fair margin, right? And actually, I think he'd probably been the best player since the upper bracket versus G2. He'd been the best player
of summer. So from summer onwards, Humanoid number 2 player in Europe.
From playoff into the season finals where we are right now, I think Humanoid's been the best player in Europe. And no, he's not getting any praise.
Better than Caps.
Yeah, better than Caps. He's been better than Caps.
This is bold. Yep. Hit me with it. Give me some reasons.
Right. Okay. So if you go even if you look at the matchup, the BO5 matchup that started, that matchup, I think across the whole range of the series, I think it outvalued Caps fair bit. I don't even think you could really point to anyone else on Fnatic across the average who particularly outvalued their co-player. I think Noah just kind of had like a non-imp like series, and Oscar. I think a lot of it was Razork and Humanoid doing a lot of work. Then the finals comes around, and Humanoid is the only person who doesn't int like an absolute maniac. Noah loses his mind, Razork loses his mind, and basically, and then Oscar has like a fine game, but like there are plenty of like bad decision making, and Humanoid's playing the entire matchup without playing them really well. And
so for your money, Humanoid should have been a champion then. He should probably have won.
Yeah. If Noah and Razork like literally didn't lose their mind, Humanoid would have won that final. And you kind of seen it as like G2's level content the deteriorate. Like Fnatic lost those games, in my opinion. I don't think G2 won them. I think they just watched Noah and Razork int live on stage, and you're just kind of like, wow, why are my carries running it down?
What do you think, Sabathine? Come on.
I mean, he's not wrong. Okay, we're gonna start that way. I think he's not wrong on one end. I think that Humanoid is one of the rare players that on peak level, you know, can really like pull series where he plays better than Caps. On the other end, I think that not only he's been helped tremendously by the best jungler in the league by a landslide this split, like it's not even close. So I feel like it is so. Bad towards Razork to say that Humanoid has been the best player, because I think that like the individual gap, this split between at each position, the highest one is Razork versus all the other junglers. So it's very easy to look good when you're picking Lucian in every game, and you have the best jungler of the league, right? You have the best laner in the game, and you have the best jungler in the league, one of the best in the world playing by your side, right? Against a pretty bad G2. So I would say that Humanoid, in terms of map impact, is pretty smart. But if you really look closely at the games, I don't think that Caps has ever played as good as it did this year. In comparison to all the previous years, you have to go back to 2019 to see Caps like with this level of domination. And I think the mid laners in Europe have been pretty good, aside from Vito and Larsen this year. Like the level is pretty good with Jackies and all these guys. So I feel like it is not only, I don't think it's that true, but I think it's really like a terrible statement towards Razork, who has literally put the whole Fnatic team on his back.
Yeah, but here's the problem with that Sabathine, right? Okay, the games okay, I'll go through them, right? Okay, so you've got that finals there, right? Okay, Humanoid's probably biggest mistake was like farming bot lane and getting insta-killed by like Kerin Sejuani. Razork was like suiciding on brand into like the enemy team, giving away barons. Like getting caught was like getting caught out like randomly in river. He was making a monopoly out of that. And then the later on series afterwards, right? You've got the BDS series. Like Razork has a really good like Vi game, but it's like Humanoid on Yone playing a melee matchup into range, like freezing out Nuclear Int's wave grabbing minions. Razork's not involved in all that. Like right now, Humanoid is playing like a very isolated like mid lane style, and Razork's fixing other like lane situations and playing more to like sides. And yeah, Razork's doing a good job, and over the course of Fnatic's history, I would agree, Razork is the boy, he's the best Fnatic player, but right now, like, Humanoid's running the ship. Like, Razork's making too many mistakes for me to say that he's, like, been the best player. Like, I take the Mad Lion series that just happened there for you. I think you could have a real conversation that Elyoya, for a large majority of that series, was outvaluing Razork.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's normal, isn't it? Isn't it like the whole purpose of the team is MDK got like built, like they literally got the check around Elyoya and were like, okay, who do you want to buy that's gonna like feed you resources the whole year, right? It's like that's literally the paradigm. This is the only team in Europe that actually plays around the jungle, and Elyoya is probably like the masterpiece of like one of the best junglers at doing it. So obviously, I feel like if there is one team that's gonna outvalue you in terms of jungle, Fnatic in direct matchup, that can be mad, but you have to see like where they bleed on the map to like enable this. And the meta is perfectly fine because yes, of course you can say that Humanoid is playing well, but the level of matchups, like the difficulty of the matchups in the mid lane and the top lane have been pretty reduced on since the beginning of the summer. It's pretty much handshaking matchup everywhere aside from like the Lucian matchups that like appeared for 3 weeks and then disappeared. But aside from that, it's mostly like Corki versus another mid laner that like farms, and even Yone with the masteries that we have in Fleet. We all know that like getting a Yone out of lane by using auto attacks and Gatling with Corki is absolutely impossible. So yeah, Humanoid can, you know, he can 50-50 the lane and play pretty fine, but the whole show has been run by whose support moves with the jungle and put pressure on the map. And I feel like farming bot and getting caught is okay, it's a small mistake, and yes, I think Razork made more mistakes, but I will die on the hill that it is always the one who tries to win who's going to look the worst when he makes a mistake. Handshaking farm in lane and farming on side is not the riskiest play, right? So obviously it's going to look worse for the player who's trying to invade with a champion that's hard, try to get the position, has to commit his body on the neutral objective because he's the smite holder, and then it's going to eventually die because there is a mistake in tempo or peeling from his team. But overall, I feel like you can say Humanoid is definitely, like, for me, he's the only runner-up to Caps at the mid lane position. But saying he's been the best player of the summer, nah, I'm not
the summer. Summer playoffs into this finals. Not all of
okay.
summer.
I mean, I don't even remember the regular season, man. It's too far back. You know, we started that. It was spring. It was a late spring. It was just back from MSI. But I would say
yeah, go on.
Right? Yeah, go on, Torin.
What I would just say is, I don't hate the take, but I also think in a way you sort of cheated, and here's why. As you pointed out, right now all the top teams look like arse. Like Fnatic can lose 0-3 while having all the leads. Literally, MDK just fucking actually for real beat fucking G2 in a 5-game series. BDS looked like hot shit the whole time and even just got reversed. Every top team is at its absolute worst right now, Kira. So in a way, you could be right, but like that's not the praise to Humanoid he would hope it would be. If I said in a past year, mate, you're going to be better than Caps for a month, he'd be like, fucking hell, what are we doing? Winning worlds? Like, no, making worlds. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not exactly the best month ever to be better than Caps. Although I will say, the reason it also does work is not only have a lot of the teams, like I said, dropped off and G2 all looked way worse, but actually I sort of agree. It's about the only 2 to 3 week period where Caps looked mortal the whole year. Aside from that, he pretty much was good even when G2 was bad in the past. So I don't hate the take. I don't hate it.
No, fuck it. I'll even add another one. Humanoid's going to get added on to the people that have beat Caps in finals. Larsen's the only person you can add Humanoid as well. G2 will make finals.
Okay.
I'll say it on the show anyway. Fnatic should beat them. I don't care that they'll like mentally boom. Fnatic should beat them. Like he was going to add a new list onto like Captures Knots. He'll get the victory. He'll get the dub.
Okay. I will say this is the best time ever to do it. If they don't win now, when are they going to win? This should be the one you win. I've got a take here, but here's the thing. A man's sort of a cheat, but we're warming into it. We're getting going. As the episodes go, the Schofield meter of the takes will increase. So I've got a take. It's going to sound spicier initially than it is, because here's the take, okay? Right, you know, in history, I don't actually know what the official record for the most MVPs ever would be. Like, Reckless would be up there. I'm sure Caps has got to be high up there. In history, though, you think of people like Caps, they must have won MVP a billion times at this point in time, or being all-pro first-team mid laner, etc., right? By the rules that modern-day people vote MVP, Caps should have almost every single one of those MVPs taken away from him in all of his career. Now, here's why that hot take exists. Because I realised it this year. Caps is the only one where the rules of how normally MVP is voted just change. So think about the year, Zabatine, where Vetio got to be MVP. I agreed with that, by the way, because I actually remember thinking, bro, this Misfits team's barely a playoff team, but he carries, like, I'm going to say, like, two out of every 3 games, he just carries the team fight. And you look at his teammates, everyone knew those weren't going to be Hall of Fame teammates. In fact, most of them don't even play in LEC anymore. Like, those were not very good players. Like, Neon was about the second best player, and even he was borderline LEC. He was sort of like bottom half ADC. So what I'll say is this: everyone else for other players uses the rule, what I hate, it's called wins over replacement. Everyone will be familiar with this concept. The notion is, it's basically who is the best player on as not as good a team who has to do more than the best player on the best team. So in all other times in history, everyone loves to vote those people the MVP. This just happened in LCS, guys. That's why that Quid guy got to be the MVP of Spring. Because everyone thought, well, 100 Thieves isn't supposed to be as good as FlyQuest and Cloud9 and TL anyway. And he's like pretty good. In fact, he's the best player on their team. So he must be the MVP of the league, because the logic of wins over replacement goes, if you took him out of 100 Thieves and you put an average mid laner in, they'd never get those. They're right, by the way, you wouldn't. The flaw with that thinking, though, is then why does Caps get all these MVPs? Because logically, he's been on the best European team and best European roster, probably something crazy like 7 out of 8 years or something bonkers. And that depends how generous I'm being with the Flackhead lineup, which still had fucking your boy Yankos on it, by the way. So, like, he's been on some really good rosters. And aren't they nearly always top ranked in the league or second with Rogue? And aren't all of his teammates getting all LEC? So by that logic, I don't agree with this. I actually go the other way, guys. If you know me from CS, when Coldzera played in that Brazilian team, every time they won, almost every single time, I gave him the MVP. Because my logic was, he's the best player on the team that gets the resources performances and performs the best. I don't care what another guy did relative to this counterpart. You get to be MVP. You're the most valuable player. So I think that's the hot take essentially is, if you guys want to keep doing wins over replacement, take them all off Caps then. Take them all off him. He doesn't get any of those. Logically, those should all go to, for real, like Larson, Humanoid, El Yoya. These people would have all the MVPs. Well, Niski. These fuckers would have them all. These are all the guys who are always on the third, second, fourth team and have to do the mega carry job. So what do you guys think? There's my hot take.
And you see it, Thorin, you see it in LCK, because they've got their new fucked up award, the player of the split, and Gen G has to split all of their awards between Canyon, Pays, and Chovy. And so, like,
because it's from player of the game, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and that used to decide MVP. They realised how fucking insane that was, so they got rid of it. But like that's why BDD ended up with like a bunch of them, like in years ago. I think he's a 3 times MVP or something. And then Faker teams. Like Faker's would actually have very few MVPs because he'd end up playing in eras where yes he would have ridiculous winning records, but people would like find ways to not vote Faker because it'd be how his teammate outmatched an opponent in the game,
of course, and
then it end up really diluted. It was a fucking bonkers like system. So now you've got like Pays winning players of the splits where arguably might not even be the best ADC in Korea.
True.
So it's like. We have literally entered like the most like fucked up thing, and so Caps under that like tutelage would have almost guaranteed like 1-0 outside of just the church of Caps.
That's a good analogy.
You do not apply the same rules to your favourite players because they are your favourites, and therefore you have like biases for them, which they do, by the way. They have got unbelievable fucking biases for G2 players.
Of course.
I feel like there is I don't know if I agree or not with the take, but I feel like there is a kind of a mental framework on like the MVP voting, which is the first tier of thinking is they just look for an anomaly. Is there some team that shouldn't be there that's there, right?
Yes.
And if in this team there is a player that like performs particularly well, then he's gonna get the MVP. If not, the second tier is gonna be, there is a team, we're gonna take the best player of the best team, right? Because we can't be wrong with that. And then if there is an anomaly, but there is no player standing, then it's the coaching staff of the split, right?
Okay,
it's like there you go. Right?
Yes.
It's like, Mad Lion is there, but no player has been playing particularly. The staff must be so smart.
Yes,
like they play like super bad for 2 splits, and then suddenly they qualified for Worlds. The staff, they just became geniuses, in the span of 3 weeks. So I feel like I would say advocate with you on the consistency of the standard by which we elect MVPs, and I think that the value of a player should kind of be the absolute value what he brings to the table throughout the split, and it will eventually slip away from Caps quite often. I think, for instance, this year on some splits, Caps has been like drastically improving G2, like G2 without Caps would have been a pretty average team, lukewarm team. So I think this year would be one of the years where he should actually deserve more than some other years. But I think there has been a lot of years where actually there was not a single standout team with a standout player, and they were like, give it to Caps.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of the same logic that by which a lot of like the T1 fans, they advocate for Faker being actually the best at playing League of Legends at any point of time. Throughout history, over the 13 years he's been playing, it's always him that has been the best player in the world, no matter what, because he's been the best player with the most awards of the best team. Therefore, he's the best player, right? I feel like this lack of consistency is just due to the fact that nobody really watched the game. They just watch the game, they play ARAMs, they have like games on the second screen, and then they come back. It's like, G2 won, yeah, Caps is MVP, my bro Caps, So I advocate on your end that there should be more consistency. But I don't think that like the years he got them, he stole them because nobody else was like really standing out.
Of course not. By the way, I would have given him most of the years. Like I say, I just think the best player of the best team should get it. But that's my take.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. But do you guys agree with me on like this kind of like mob logic of like, there is no anomaly, so therefore we're gonna give it to Caps, and in Korea it's the same. It's like Chovy. It's like, he chose Chovy. Oh, what a wise judgment. You choose the best player of the best team, right?
Yes.
Don't worry, Zabatine. I don't even think the LEC voting panel should have their votes. Like now, I think they should have all.
That's not even a hot take, but okay.
No, the same way as you can lose human rights. I think the LEC voting panel should lose voting rights. I've seen those sheets. I've seen the first, second, third All Pros like that. Every single year they're abominations. I remember you done that video and 2017 where you rinse for Yamato for him trolling the votes. Put it this way, Yamato's voting didn't get any better. I was like, he must have watched that video on mute. But yeah, I was like, fucking, I've seen some travesties.
I feel like we should. Okay, that's a hot take on the top of a hot take, but that always it's been my take for quite some time. We should ban these things. I hate them.
You just don't like it.
I actually hate the MVP, the most team, the coaching staff of the split. Like in closed doors, nobody sees what's going on. True. Must improve players. Like, okay, must improve. Like he starts playing bad. Like Jackie's over the year plays better. You can put this one. There is no pro view. Yeah, we're all condemned to watch pieces of laning, and sometimes we just go over like Razork clearing his Krugs for like 15 seconds while laners actually do something on the map, and then he goes to a play because Observer have like there is a technique in which they never miss action. So yeah, Razork after the Krugs gonna go bot and get a double kill, but so we've been spending 15 seconds watching him clearing the Krugs, whereas like you don't know if VTO took a good trade against Frescovi or if there was something happening in mid or top lane. Nobody knows who's creating pressure, who's hard to play against. So when we come, we only have like the baseline, like the kill participation, KDA, forward percent, and who won the split, and then we have to select like cherry pick out of a magician hat who was the best player. I hate it. I think it's detrimental for the whole like industry, because we need to actually, if you want people to improve, we need to celebrate the people who play good, and we're never doing that with these awards.
Yeah, fair. I agree. What do you call it? You need pro view to make really good assessments, but you can make assessments based off of like what you have. I remember I'd done this with told Rich and Nightmare about this. It was like an LCK game, full BO3. It was like Doran versus Kingen, and it was like the camera was in lane 5 minutes 30 for the entirety of the best of 3. That was it. That was the total like BO3 3 games. The camera was only there for like 5 minutes. I was like, I don't know what you could extract from those 5 minutes. It's I
will say, one of the reasons why that format doesn't work, unfortunately, because here's the sad things, Aberdeen, because I'm a sports fan, it's actually really important, like, for example, in the NBA and the NFL, to have those awards, because the way that those sports work, where obviously it's not like football, they actually have, like, rules based on salary cap as to how much you can spend. You actually need, essentially, a way that you can reward the guy who's the superstar on the really bad team this year, but he did play, like, the second best shooting guard. You need, like, a way in history that he gets rewarded. Like, he was amazing, even though look, his team sucks, because that's the way the sport's built, to provide like a level of parity, right? The problem is, I agree though, they're not actually even doing that in League of Legends though. Like, I'll tell you 2 factors that drive me up the wall when I look at the voting. So one is people do it based on how good they think the player is, not how he played in the split. So, like, there's players voting, and you're going, why are they voting him? Because that guy carried all the scrims against them. That's what they mean. They mean, oh, I think he's really good, regardless of whether he was on, like, the 7th best team or something. That's, by the way, funnily enough, why, like, as much as all fans hate on that angle, that's the whole reason why everyone said Bo was awesome, guys. Everyone who's played against him says he's fucking unbelievable. You guys think he isn't because you watch the LEC games, so you disagree with pros then, but that's how they're fucking voting these awards. And then the other one is, there's also a type of person, and funny enough, Yamato's a perfect example of this. If you ask Yamato, who are your 3 junglers, for example, right, put it this way, there are years, maybe he would have done it this split, I don't know, there are splits where he'll put like Jankos there, even though you'd go, bro, Jankos, isn't he off the... What he means is like, oh, I don't worry about these 2 weeks, like he's going to be the best again, like he has the core pieces to be the best, so for me, he's always top 3 until someone else sort of like permanently takes that spot. So essentially, I sort of agree with Zabatine. The real problem is people aren't doing what it's supposed to be, which is only from the official games in this split, you are voting other people. Don't ever troll vote. By the way, that Americans started that, but don't ever troll vote. Like, I actually do think that is also fucking heinous, where there's going to be like, I'll give you an example. Let's say Humanoid and Larson were really close to who's going to be all LEC, but then on your team, you think Larson's a dickhead because he just farms. So your team all agree, we're just going to vote for like every other stupid player in the league, and all our friends, we're all going to vote fucking Saken the best mid laner, just so that like every time you would have voted for Humanoid, we'll vote for Saken, and then your player can never win. Like, that is bullshit. People don't know that literally happened between Bjergsen and Jensen back in the day. Some of the Bjergsen teammates would just troll vote, like, fucking, I can't remember who would have been the mid laners back then, but some like Paul Belter, they'd put him over Jensen and go, and then know that you could never win because how the points worked,
There is one more thing I want to add and then finish, is like, I think what you said about the NFL and NBA is very true, but I think the stats that are pulled in the NFL and NBA are like based on facts.
Okay.
Like if for instance you had Caps versus Humanoid, and we would compare the status of the Azir versus Orianna matchup to the average Azir versus Orianna matchup in Challenger in Europe, right? For instance, like top Challenger in Europe, and we're like, oh, he has been like 5 CS up versus the average of this matchup. That makes sense, right? It means that he has been playing better than the average of the matchup. But what does that mean when you have, for instance, Zeka playing, I don't remember which world, and he's playing Ahri versus Sylas, and Sylas is supposed to sit under turret and getting poked. Sure. And it's like, oh, Zeka played so well against Chovy. It's like, no, Chovy is farming another turret, right? It's very, very hard matchup in early game, and you're going to scale later. But people will only see one instance of a matchup, but never like the actual value. When you have rebound, when you have like shots, right, in the NBA, when you have, I don't know, like assists or passes in the NFL, I don't know, but in soccer we have them, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, infield passes that were actually leading to a, you know, to a movement forward of the team. They count these things and then they put it on the board, and you're like, oh, he's been valuable in that sense for his team. In League of Legends, it's like, oh yeah, his KP was hard. It was huge. It's like, oh yeah, he was playing Karthus, man. Yeah, thanks for the info. Thank you so much. Like he pressed R and he did it. So because of this, I feel like we can't really create these awards because Riot has never produced stats that were actually an explanation of what was happening on the screen, but just like parameters that they cherry picked because they were easy to pull, that they just display on screen in a way that the audience has something to look at during the pre-shows.
Okay. Do you have another hot take, Sabatine? Give me your spiciest one. Let's get spicy. Give me a good one. Come on.
Okay. I'm going to do one that's it's a pretty general because I'm going to speak about Riot Games. I would say that Riot Games is doing very average as a game designer. And surprisingly, because it's formerly a game design company, and very well as a publisher. And my reason for that is the humongous amount of never heard of games that got canceled. Sure. MMO that should be coming in 50 years. The Riot Forge games that were high in quality, but then really never made it to the AAA, never really distributed anywhere. So they kind of stayed in high quality indie games for a pretty high price that very few people that even are fans of the IP played. And I think that they never really broke the records with a game that wasn't a ripoff so far, because their attempt to make like their 3 base games, TFT is a ripoff of Dota Chess. Yes, Dota, yeah. LoL is a ripoff of Dota, and Valorant is obviously a ripoff of CSGO. So they're very good at improving known recipe and distributing very well. And I think they are the best at creating environments, which I think is half on publishing and half on the development. And I would say I give extra point now for the design choices of 2XKO being a tag versus, which is one of the hardest to play, understand, and watch. Their Valorant, their card game hasn't really popped off the way Hearthstone did, for instance, for Blizzard. So I would say, although everybody celebrates a Riot game as a company that never fails, the way people used to celebrate Blizzard 15 years ago as a company that never fails, I think that if you really look at the facts, I don't think they have been that outstanding in in terms of game delivery, but their publishing strategy is genius, and that's why they're leading the market right now.
I agree, 100%.
A lot of people would say otherwise. It's a hot take in the sense of the world, right?
I don't even play League. I play Dota, so I agree. I think their game design shit. I just watch. It's like I would not opt to play any fucking Riot game whatsoever. I think their game design's absolutely abhorrent. But like the thing is they actually managed somehow to like get like that niche into like it's competitive, but it's just not quite competitive enough for hardcore gamers. But like the pleb masses just will like flood to it because it's got that easy like access, but a high enough complexity for like people who are technical to enjoy. I also think that aesthetic, they kind of lucked out with it, but the rise of like throwaway anime in the West, all of their like games were able to like hook into that in terms of like NA and EU. So they definitely that. I don't know anything about like the publishing side, but like there's nothing that hot there for me, mate, because I've never been one for praising Riot.
I mean, I will say, go on.
No, I just wanted to ask you, is it like a lukewarm take? Like, did I do a cold take and everybody agrees with that? Because I feel like everybody around me would say no, like they make the best games ever on every single attempt they do.
I feel like that's more of a normie take. Maybe normies think that. And the reason why I find it weird personally is, like, I'm not exactly a massive Dota 2 fan, but I've never even thought League was that insane a game. Like, for me, I'm actually shocked it became like the biggest game ever. Like, I think actually, again, publishing is the success. Essentially, publishing is where they're good. They're actually terrible at fucking making games. If people don't know, they killed it again with publishing in Valorant. Like, Valorant has a player base in China and Korea that CS will never have, because CS isn't on the machine when you go to the PC cafe. And Valve still doesn't understand that's the way games are played in Asia. They still think we're all people, like in the West, like them, who buy a PC and then you buy the latest game and then you buy and nobody does it that way. So I will say, I do think the publishing side is 100 times better because I actually also think the craziest thing for Riot is, you'd think with their head start from League, etc., all these games should be slam dunks, but they're actually pretty much all worse. Like, Valorant is never going to come close to beating CS, just it's not the bigger game. TFT wasn't even like the biggest game in the universe. Actually, that was like a brief period where all those games, like, they had the fucking Dota 1 as well. They had like 2 or 3 at the same time, or chess. Everyone was playing all that shit. So, no, actually, they've basically lucked out with one game ever. They've just rode it to this point. So, fair play on the publishing. I sort of agree. Right.
I'd say they are still leading on the niche of TFT. I think Auto Battlers, they win really like by a huge margin. On the FPS, on the tactical FPS, I cannot say, because I mean you're the CS guy, so obviously you know better. I think because they have distribution in China and in Asia in terms of raw numbers, they probably like will eventually outnumber like the CS, right? But so I would say like in terms of like establishing empires based on like clever publishing strategy, but the game at the core, I feel like I'm still waiting for Riot Games to come with a game and say, that's our recipe, that's how we make this, and be like, God, how genius they were. League of Legends was like this. When I played the first time, I was like, man, this game is crazy. But it was like League of Legends from season 1 to like 5. And now I feel like they got much more tame. And I think their commercial strategy of like putting all the mechanics into a champion to be able to sell the mechanics, make the game worse over time. But yeah, I feel like we can at least respect that from them. It's TFT, LoL, and Valorant are like very, very big games. And I'm still waiting for like the Riot games, that comes. And I'm like, oh, there is people that are on par with the people from Valve. Have you guys played Deadlock? Have you tried? Have you looked at it? Because it like I've seen it, and there is a lot of really good game designers in Valve. That's crazy. That's really crazy. Bad.
Right, I've got a take. Here's what's funny. I actually know for a fact this is a fucking insanely scalding take. It's just, actually, because of how fans are, I don't know, maybe you won't think it's as crazy. So I'll say, this was a famous tweet of mine. I just never expanded on it. I never did the video, but I'll explain now. I did a tweet last year where the tweet just said, I think it was to Dom or something. Dom had commented on something in the LPL. And I said, Xiao Hu is who fans think Faker is. And they all lost their minds. Because every fan's a moron. So they all went like, so you're saying Xiao Hu's won Worlds 3 times and 10 LCK. And it's like, I never said any of that, did I? What I said, remember, was Xiao Hu is who you think Faker is. Now, here's why I said that statement. Because obviously, by the way, this is actually before T1 had won Worlds, which was their one globe tournament in the last like 3 years or something fucking insane like that. Is one of the things that's so whack about the Faker narrative. And I know because I was there from day one. I saw him actually play his first live match live on fucking OGN. I've seen every game of this guy's career. Is if you go Faker from 2013 to like, I'd say end of 2017, he was the best player ever. He was cracked out of his mind. He was so good. I used to make all those videos where it's like, he's not even just the best League player. He's basically already transcended League the game. And he's like Flash and Simple and like these players that are so... Daigo. The joke is, you don't even ever have to have seen a fighting game and you know who Daigo is because he transcended his game. He's not just the best. And in fact, you can debate, is he the best? Doesn't matter. These players just become iconic in the same way as some American who's never going to watch soccer knows the name Pele. They know the name Messi, Ronaldo, etc., right? The reason why Faker's career has been so sad, the narrative since then, is his fans just kept it like, oh no, he is still that guy though. He's still secretly the best individual player, but then he's also like a great captain and a thinker. It's like, no, you missed it. That's the worst thing. His career had 2 portions. It had the super stud mid laner. By the way, mid lane was the best role by far. Then the second half is this captain role where he's almost like Doinby-esque and he's like the general in the game and he's working with people and sometimes he limits his own drafts so someone else can get a pick and they play to that person's lane. And think about from 2022 onwards, half the T1 style is don't meet and have a 5v5 team fight. Their whole style is like play on the side lanes, play skirmishes where you escape from fights, get like free dragons every time you can, but aside from that, be elusive, be a team that escapes, or mad shit like we play 2 ADCs in bot lane and we just win the lane out 5 minutes into... None of this is Faker individually in mid lane. So the reason why I had said that statement is because if you actually follow the LPL, and this is, by the way, with the last couple of years where Xiaohu's actually been on his career slump, Xiaohu is simultaneously a captain and a shot caller and a brilliant mind. Bro, remember when he used to go top lane and play Lucian when it was a mid and ADC pick, and he was still the best player in the world in top lane, right? He is the shot caller, but he also can actually be one of the best mid laners too. He can actually have times where in lane he beats the best mid laners in the LPL, and if you go back a year or two, he used to still beat a perennial all LPL pro player, and I'm not talking about the Korean one. If you just finish top 2, you automatically get that. In the LPL, you have to do it for real, guys. You either have to be on the most dominant team or you have to be a top player. So that's the sense in which Xiaohu is who fans think Faker is. They don't get that, like, bro, Faker isn't choosing to not have hands. That part of his game has gone. I think he even knows it. By the way, I'll even add this in. I believe the reason they keep mentioning every time they slump that he still has the injury is, I think he probably has a permanent RSI injury, if I had to guess. I think he probably can't just grind 1 billion hours and play Chovy style. I think that game's gone from him now. I think he knows that. By the way I watch Faker play, I actually think Faker agrees with me, bro. I think he gets what the point of his career at this point is, and then he's not trying to be the guy who just beats you with hands one-on-one in lane. Like, that guy left half a decade ago. So the reason why I say Xiaohu is who they think Faker is Xiaohu can do it all, mate. He can be your captain. He can be your guy who gives up in draft. By the way, he can take a Corki or a fucking Lucian or a Zeri in draft and win the game for you. He can beat the other best mid laners, and he can actually be in teams which can also go to Worlds finals, LPL finals. So there's the hot take. Obviously, every fan's going to lose their mind, but I think it's well argued. What do you think?
So I'll give like 2 different angles of it. So first of all, right, I as a Xiaohu believer and lover, Xiaohu has like 2 like things like against him in terms of his legacy. Post like the Uzi RNG, when he became him and Ming's team, during certain sections of regular seasons, he genuinely doesn't give a fuck. As in, like, he has, like, suicided himself on, like, Corki to, like, make games end because he genuinely just doesn't care. Like, he is one of those people that the league-centered tournament does not suit. As in, if it was like tournaments all the time, Xiaohu would like much prefer that. Okay. Like, if you send Xiaohu to like a tournament, he plays much better than he does in like a league, and that is a problem because, you know what I mean, a lot of the league play is how we look at like legacy and stuff like that, right? Second, like, issue for like Xiaohu's career is actually in itself comes in like 2 parts, where Xiaohu was at one point in time like insanely elite in the sense of like he was the dynastic like best like Chinese like mid, and he was the bar that everyone else had to measure against. Even people like Scout weren't better than like Xiaohu in seasons that they ended up winning early LPL. Xiaohu's teams just ended up losing in dramatic fashion. The problem is when Knight came along, the poll that you measure like Xiaohu up against went so unbelievably fucking ridiculously high that like it became like tamer, and then people who he was better than for like a lot of his career came up and rised above him. Like, on average, I think across the later halves, outside of the top lane period, I actually think Scout's probably been better than like Xiaohu as well. Though to begin with, I used to think Scout was the worst person. The shot calling thing as well, that you can't really take away from. And he's made some absolutely diabolical fucking teammates work, by the way. I would like anyone to play with Cryan. Let me just say, Cryan might be one of the worst players to have ever won anything, period. He's up there like Baolan status, by the way. Like, this guy is so deficient in so many regards. Like, go pull up a Cryan POV and it'll be fucking onions like salad with your eyes, mate. It's awful. The other thing is, I'll go back a little bit. I am actually one of those people that actually still thinks if Faker was just a player, like, and it was just his job to be a player, he probably could still be a lot better than he actually is.
True believer, fucking hell.
And it's not that I'm a true believer. I actually.
He's been playing 11 years. Has he just got immortal wrists or something? How long do they last? Just never go away. What is this? Okay.
I don't know like his injury like status. I'm not even going to like think on that, right? Okay. But like when I would say like compared to that, like if you were to look at like how like Faker like prep CS for like last hitting under the tower than like Akali, he's better at it than like Knight. He's better at it than like a majority of players. Like, he still has unbelievably good like not as of right now, but the previous years on like the Gragas and the Nautilus, he had unbelievable like skill shot accuracy. The way he was able to like, you would throw the Nautilus hook so it goes around terrain and lollipop people. Like those are all like really, really like hard to do. He moved away from like the high level like skill expressive like picks, but like he won WEC on like the Yasuo. It wasn't like it's the cleanest Yasuo like ever, but there are like still things he can turn his hand to. And again, now this is speculation. From my understanding of what has been reported, Faker basically coaches the team and shot calls the team, and is like the big brother of the team, and so those are his now most important like requirements, and like it is literally like the Master Splinter with the fucking with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and like playing the game is literally just as like a side symptom to like anything else. Like if he was just a star player and he just had to like do that, I think he could be like a BDD-esque like level like player. But like that isn't like his metric. His metric is like it seems to be like running like T1 and playing his conceptual style of like T1, which is an effective thing.
Okay. It is not that bad of a take, to be frank. I think that's first. I think praising Xiao, which I think is probably the most underrated player of all time. I don't think there is a single individual I can think of in the history of League of Legends that has the individual skill expression. The consistency, and if you look at the track record of the teammates of Xiao, you definitely see that he's a trajectory bending player, meaning that if you play around him, you usually end up much better than your average as a player. I think that his versatility is the most versatile of all time because he's the single player that won major tournaments on 2 different positions in 2 different solo lanes with the champion pool. That like the difference in champion pool that it means. So it's crazy. I'd say there is one thing that it's very hard to measure. And I think that's at least in my book, it's what makes Faker stand out is the information grab. I think Faker grew up with the Flash, the watching the Koreans play StarCraft, and the way he pans his camera, I think he gathered just much more information than any other mid laner and any other player in the world, and that's what made him consistently good. And I think that Xiao is not nowhere near. He's very good, very consistent, very good at shot calling. But the strategy, like if you look at the level of strategy and the positional level of
Xiao
the team,
does it as well, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't do it as well, I would say, because when I watched Xiao's team, like in terms of position, I think there is a lot of things that you see T1 do over like the span of 10 years that has been consistently done, meaning that the ability to gather information and make the decisive play and use words to trigger actions from the teammates and have them perform at this level is something that Faker does, I think, him alone. I don't think anyone else is able to do that. Maybe Perks was doing it that way in Europe. I think he's very underrated in that field. But I would say that where you're right, Thorin, is I think that the fantasy, right, the parasocial relationship that some fans have with the person of Faker and the player he is, there is times where Xiao was exactly that guy and has been thrown directly in the radar, especially because what Kerr said is like there was Knight, and it was Chovy. So he's never been like the very number one. And so because of this, he's never been like all his skills that are like outside of the spectrum of being a good mid laner has never been like seen by the rest of the population. Probably China sees it because, they have more like data, pro views and all these things. But very, very few people, I would say, at least in the West, have the only thing they can say is like, oh yeah, he won 2 tournaments, 1 in top, 1 in mid, he's versatile and he's a good carry. But a lot of people that screamed against him at Worlds from Europe, that I talked to many of them, they're like, this guy is a monster individually, mechanically, in terms of like position, team fighting, shot call, like this guy has it all. So I would say there is a lot of time in history where Faker wasn't really performing well. His team was not strategically performing in the way they do since 3 years, since they have this team. And yet people would say, no, Xiao is just like a good Lucian OTP. So I would give you that.
Also, World's Finals.
Essentially, yeah. I also think as well, essentially, that people have the narrative wrong. If you want to do great captains, then in the modern day, the 3 great captains are Faker, Doinby, Xiao Hu. There's your 3 great captains. Yeah. But I think people just make it like, Xiao was just like, wasn't he just the mid laner when Uzi was there? By the way, if people don't know, Xiao Hu just made like his 10th fucking LPL final. He already has the most titles of anyone in active history. And if he wins, he'll be 2 ahead of Knight. So like, fuck off with that. That'll be 6 titles if he wins this one now. Even if he doesn't, by the way, Knight only gets to tie him. So what a fucking cracked career this had. And by the way, before anyone goes, Uzi has only 2 of those.
Yeah, He's done it the hard way.
With us. He won without Uzi. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the funny thing is Xiaohu's team was winning, and then Uzi joined and they lost. Uzi actively made, well, not so much other factors, but it made the team like worse, as in like the actual team play like structure of the original RNG actual worse, even though Whoosh was an abomination. Another thing that actually, interestingly enough, it's not that it goes against him like Xiaohu, but it's worth mentioning is like Xiaohu's best periods of individual and like macro was like a pairing of minds. It was like that whole, and we'll come to this maybe later on, Dandy Mata thing, where like when they were like together, Ming and Xiaohu together were able to like take teams to like the zenith, right? That neither of them, once they were taken apart, could really like match once again. And they were kind of like, it's not like Xiaohu was like as bad, but it was never the peaks that he had with Ming. And the other thing to consider is, and this was one that really doesn't help, is the World's Finals. It's like, it wasn't that it was a Xiaohu meta, and it definitely was a Faker meta, but like Xiaohu's World's Finals was not good, and particularly was. And the thing was, he actually had a really good semi-final against like someone who Yagao, who I think people massively fucking overrate, but like I think Xiaohu's a better player than Yagao, and I think he like showed it in terms of how he outvalued Yagao in that sense, but. So in terms of that, I understand that. I do agree though that like, you know, people just like misrepresent like who Faker is as an actual player than now, and they like just don't want to actually talk about what his actual strengths are, and they just want to dog on Xiaohu too.
Who's the next one then? Who's the next hot take? Do you have one, Kira?
Yeah, I've got one. Right? Okay, so I've been going back and I just brought him up, and so I've been going back watching loads of the old VODs, right? Okay, 'cause I've been watching a bunch of old like Faker stuff, and you need to watch other players to understand Faker. And my God, and I don't give a fuck, is Dandy the most overrated great player I have ever seen in my entire fucking life. Dandy, the MVP Ozone White player from Samsung. Holy fucking shit, is Dandy the one of the most over... Like, as in, like, if you see any of those morons put out a fucking Twitter thing of, like, the top 5, like, junglers of all time and all that, right? Like, put it this way, I think Jankos clears them like easily, like not even like close. I wouldn't even like have him in the same conversation as Jankos. I actually wrote the list down. I don't even think Dandy's in the top 5 anymore. And I was like, and people just constantly bring him up, and it's always like the same talking points. And it's not that they're true. It's like Worlds was insane. Yes, Worlds was insane, but like one Worlds is not a career, right? And the second of all is like, oh, how he changed the metagame with Mata. But the problem is like when you actually watch it, it doesn't actually stand up to like consideration. Like I would actually argue like Blue done more to evolve like the game because of, and it was more a response to what Blue was doing and Ozone learning from Blue with Heart and Spirit and Daddy than it was like Mata and Dandy just like innovating the game completely, and they were the only people that understood all this. It was just Blue had different player constraints and so played it to a different way. And bro, this guy, like I watch old League of Legends, this guy's gameplay does not hold up well. Like it really doesn't. It's like it's really, really suspect at times.
I feel like the discussion around who was the best, like the all-time best in the game that gets patched every 2 weeks, you know, at least, you know, even if soccer changed, I think that Pelé, Maradona, Messi, Ronaldo, Zidane, they were all playing kind of the same game, even though like obviously athletically people change. Like League is such a drastically different game. I would say it is so easy to play as a jungle when nobody's playing jungle support and you're moving with Mata and your mid laner. I think that the year 2014 for Pound was probably his most dominant year of all time, like until like the MSI 2015 was really like his golden era. So if you have mid prio and your support goes with you and you're playing extremely aggressive jungle and you arrive 3v1 against a jungle, doesn't really matter if you play right or if you play wrong. But over the course of his career, I don't think that like Ozone was like a leading team. Like for years and years, they struggled to actually make, you know, make the leap and close the gap with like the top teams. So I feel like, for instance, someone like Karsa would definitely, for me already, Karsa has been consistently like immensely improving teams he's been playing in. Very underrated jungle, back from the time that Thorin mentioned of the Flash Wolves, and then had a pretty good track record in China. I feel like, you know, rating jungles out of like I hate this thing of, and Samsung White, by the way, just it's my favorite team of all time, but I absolutely hate the fact that we take someone that's my preference. Picking one tournament that lasts 3 weeks and making it a statement for a game that lasted 15 years makes literally no sense. Like if you want to judge the best players in the world over the course of 15 years, you need to look at like their performance and their achievement over time. Samsung Galaxy White lasted literally like this version of the team lasted a year, I think. I don't exactly remember when they made the swap.
Yes.
Right, it was the swap between Dade and Pound on the mid lane position. It was the sister team, so every improvement that White was finding, Blue was finding it too, and every improvement that Blue was finding, White. So it was really, as you said, meta, patch, player preferences, level of confidence, and they were like bursting in confidence after the regional qualifier and stuff. So it is so upsetting to see like these rankings with like, oh, it was a very dominant performance at World, therefore he was one of the best. Because if you look at his performance when he's one of the guys that he came to NA, right? If I remember well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even Looper, right? They came to NA, and Looper did some good things, but you see some junglers. You know, I remember of Kakao, for instance. Spirit came to the West. You see these guys, and you see the team they played with, and you're like, oh yeah, you're a jungle that needs three lanes of prio to actually execute your game plan, which is get 2 camps, invade the jungle, fight to death. If it doesn't work, just FF. And the game has evolved, right? The game has evolved. It's not that anymore.
The problem I have with this take is, technically, this applies to everyone who didn't have a really long career, because the problem is when this guy was on top was 2014, so we'd only had like the second year of like LCS, etc. So at the time, that did make you the GOAT. Like, people forget, it's not an exaggeration. After year 1, 2013, Faker was the GOAT already, because 1 year at that level was already enough to be the best player ever. Like, no one had even done 2.5 years of being really amazing at that point in time. So the problem is, I will always think the worst thing about the Samsung exodus is no one will ever know for those players what their careers would have been. The only one who actually escaped was Deft, because he just kept playing at elite level in LPL. Then he came back early enough that he still had the rest of his career. Now he even won Worlds on the way out. So he got to win everything. Everyone else who did that basically tanked their career. Like, even Mata, yeah, he had a brief time in LPL where they were good, and he was on the RNG team you were talking about. Then he came back, did the super team. After that, he was washed immediately. By the time he got to T1, that was one of the worst T1s they had, was the one where he was on it. He was a bit washed at that point in time. So a lot of those players, sadly, and people like him and Mata obviously had the chance to be the greatest ever to play their roles. They somewhat sacrificed it for money in this weird experiment where they went to the LPL. And the worst thing about theirs, if everyone remembers, was at least the other ones made some sense. Like Imp, Acorn and Flame going to LGD made sense because that was just like a cracked out team. Dandy and Mata both just went to the same team that had like dog shit fucking laners. So it was like you took like the best jungle support and put them on a team with average ass. Most people here couldn't even name the 3 players.
Michi.
Yeah, no one remembers these players. They weren't the good ones. It's not even later on when you all remember an Easy Whom. That was years later. They were on some mid-ass teams. And so the problem is this. If you mean his whole career, well, yeah, like, I mean, actually, I think Zabatine nailed it. If you remember, in 2020, I did a video where I said, you can actually make the case Jankos is the best jungler to ever play League of Legends. You look at his career, unbelievable resume, unbelievable consistency year on year, played every single style. By the way, the other name was Karsa. Karsa's in there as well. It's why Score gets to be in there with fuck all, like 1 championship ever, because actually junglers don't tend to have longevity. They don't get to be truly great year on year on year on year. And crucially, they don't tend to be either good domestically and good internationally. So it's not a big list. With that said, though, I do think you're wilding, and here's why. Because first of all, do you remember what the infamous anime-style nickname of Dandy was? Do you remember, Kira? What was his nickname?
No, I actually can't. So
his nickname was the Prince of Thieves. Now, that should already tell you a little something, mate, because you know how many fucking games this guy stole a Baron or a Dragon? It is mental. He was actually one of the players. By the way, he was doing this in 2014. Like, I was laughing with Monty about this today when we were watching back that Cloud9 FlyQuest game where they just let Inspired, like, hang glide in and just grab the Baron. You're like, what is this? You had your whole team there. You're going really slowly with like the health bar up. Like, bro, people can't even pull those off in 2024. This guy used to be the guy where, for real, you'd be losing a game. You're about to take a Baron or and he would do the old school full commit flash by himself in the pit and smite it and get it so many times. It's gross, bro. Like, you could look at the rest of that team and go, but he had a super team. They still would have lost fuck tons of games if it wasn't for this guy. So he was unbelievably good at that. Secondly, I do think that you cannot overrate how good what him and Mata did to jungling was. Like, this isn't an exaggeration. if it wasn't for them and what they did in Samsung White, like, I'm not joking, if you went back in time and you did some like Kennedy assassination of Samsung White, if metaphorically in a video game Minecraft, before they came to the arena, the West would be up shit's creek for the next 10 years. Every single Western great team in mid laner and jungle took those VODs and studied it like they were fucking decoding like the hieroglyphics with the Rosetta Stone, bro. Like, they were like looking at the VOD frame by frame, and all of a sudden people like think of these are the greatest macro players ever, Nuke Duck, Mithy, they were all suddenly like, I think I get how you jungle now. Like, that was like what changed the whole game for them, and he was one of the reasons why. Like, it wasn't just like, here's what I don't get about that take. Maybe if you want to talk about how like the team's team fought, Blue was better. They had like interesting lane style where they just get Deft to survive the first part, then mid game they just can't be beaten in a team fight. But the thing with this team was, the reason why TSM could never have won that quarterfinals ever is because every single time at the beginning of the game with any comp, they could find and isolate kills in the fucking fog of war. It's unbelievable how they did it. Like, they would just set up their wards in a way where you'd think if you just anti-strat the VOD, you know, you watch what they do, I'll just put mine there. You could never get them, bro. They always would have like a pocket where you're thinking there isn't a ward there. You walk onto it and then Mata just comes up, roams up on a Thresh or something, and you shout, oh, look, you've got like a Lee Sin and a Thresh just fucking you up in the jungle when you thought you were just walking through. Like, I'm fucking just going through my path in. So they already, no team ever early game could fuck with these guys. They were unbelievably good. And then lastly, if you just watch that Worlds, that's why it's such a weird take, because you're making like you watch the VOD and he's all shit. Bro, at Worlds, he's the only jungler that could play every champion, right? You had all the meta ones. Everyone knows back then. Everyone loved the ganky ones, right? Lee Sin, Elise, and fucking, what was it, Kha'Zix? Or Jarvan. There you go, Jarvan. Yeah. He could play the Rengar and all the shit no one else could even play, bro. He had them all. He had the Evelynn too, which was like a more of an LPL pick. This guy was cracked. So my problem is this. Yeah, maybe I'm talking about for a year and a half. He wouldn't have the longevity to match up with the names I'm talking about before. But I disagree. I think he was a fucking sick player. I don't know, what angle was he not good?
Because, like, mate, see that you're telling me the Prince of Thieves, right? I was thinking that was like he was like the angle was he was giving all the gold fucking back, Robin Hood style. Because anytime they lose to Blue, I see a 10k gold lead, and I'm like, okay, I've forgotten the VOD, but I know what Dandy's going to do here. He's got like the iconic, like, he goes onto Rengar, tries to one-shot Death, dies, comes out of base, does it again, dies. I was like, okay, Dandy's still, he goes to Baron, dies again. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, Dandy. Like, anytime it's like the iconic, they lose to Blue, it involves Dandy either A, like, tilting, or like B, Daddy, like, knowing who he's playing against, does some absolute bullshit where he just, like, sits somewhere on the map because he knows the other person's, like, tendencies, like, all too well. The other thing is, I will not disregard, World is insane, and he's crazy. But the whole point is, I don't know, like, to the degree, what, like, Dandy was able to do without Mata. Because I saw Mata transform so many, like, junglers from, like, a player without Mata to a player like with Mata and his guidance, and how he'd done it so often and so regularly. I'm like, okay, I understand that. Everyone bangs on like Looper because he's literally known as Mata's third summoner spell. Like, Mata literally like fucking calls in a Space Marine drop pod and Looper appears on a ward right next to him, right? But Looper doesn't get any credit for that because the narrative goes that Mata's telling Looper what do you call it, to TP stuff. And it's even funny because like Monty now talks about Looper, like said that about Looper, but if you watch Monty doing his commentary, he's like, Monty's praising Looper at the time. He's saying like, you know what I mean? Because that narrative hasn't like came around yet. So like, look, and Monty's saying like, oh, Looper, he's the best teleport user in the entire world. He's like, he completely changed this team and stuff like that. And it's like, it's so funny to like hear that. And I'm just like, okay. And so I never, like, if you were to, I know what Jankos looked like without like caps and stuff like that. I've seen the means tested, and like Dandy's gameplay like holds up for a period, but like he has like deficiencies, and even he has deficiencies, and not to take away from his like peaks, because it's a different era, and everyone had like problems in the like gameplay, but everyone makes out that he's like so squeaky clean and everything, like, you know, everything was like so perfect that he revolutionized the game in many ways, like did, but his deficiencies were like, put it this way, he was the reason they won Worlds, but he's also the reason they never won LCK.
Yeah, but
obviously they did win it, obviously, with Daddy, but a very different time period.
I'd say, you know, there is something about the jungle position that's very misunderstood, is like the profile of junglers, because it is much harder to play like Dandy than to play like Bengi. You can control lanes.
Well,
you know, you can sit in the bush and have the best laner in the world and just wait for the jungle to try to gank him, match the 2v2, kill 2 people, and then recall and play for tempo, right? That's the Yanko style that works very well. No junglers are able to do both. I think that one thing that needs to be given to Dandy, very few junglers were able to be that often on the good side of the coin toss as a coin flip jungle. If you looked at like the junglers back then, right, Spirit and stuff like this, these guys were really good and they were very aggressive because there was a culture in scrims in Korea. But I think that it is. I don't consider like Dandy to be a top 5 jungle all time, but I feel like saying that he was an Inter is a very normal thing, because I feel like if you play, it's like Bo is an Inter, like right by the same standards you say Dandy was an Inter, then it means that Bo is a bad player. And I would die on the hill that say that he's one of the best jungles we have in the world at the moment, and he could even be a generational talent. But the reason it's never going to work is because you got to put the resources.
Davison, you don't realise how hot that was, bro. You just touched the sun, bro.
Yeah.
That's what you.
By the way, I think for real, we should just spin this into your hot take. That should be your hot take. Dandy is one of the best. No, I mean Bo is one of the best junglers in the world. Go hot take. Hit me with it.
I mean, what else is to say? It's like, is it just a jungle that like he did it? It just needs. I think that there are some players, you know, that like are extremely gifted, and you'll never see it because the way they play is not at the starting point of the dependency chain in League of Legends. If you're a good mid, it's easy. You get mid prio, that's the start of the chain of anything in League of Legends. If your bot lane is average and you have mid prio, the bot lane is better. Look at any team that has a great mid lane in the history of the game. If you are a jungle based on invading and invalidating the enemy jungle and playing off the edge, first, you need mid prio, and you need people that are ready to move with you. It means that there is a political warfare in the locker room that you need to have with your coach and your teammate. It is because I don't think there is a lot of ADCs that like to play, you know, Xayah and go 0-0-0 and be minus 15 CS because there is a Kindred in the jungle that's taking the... There is very, very few, like at least in the West, I don't know a lot of ADCs that are like, you know, guys, you know, drag me to the enemy nexus. I'll be very happy at the end of the day. Flackhead is probably like this. Kobe was a player like this, but I think there is plenty of players that don't even know how to play the game if the game is not moving toward them. And you can see clearly in this summer split, this is in the last 3 years is the time of history in the game design where the ADCs have the least amount of resource, proximity with the rest of the team. They're just left on an island, and you see plenty of like top level ADCs that don't do anything because they don't know what to do because they're not supposed to be left alone. So because of this, I feel like it's so easy to put the blame on someone like Bo because nobody has been able to pull a system where we move with them and we try to play on the edges. Because to play the play style he wants to, you need players that are able to execute very, very good dives, that are able to sacrifice waves, to move on a timing, a jungle timing, meaning your wave is like frozen or something, you're still gonna move because it doesn't matter. You're gonna win back more later on, but you need to trust that. You need to be able to play with the vision in the bushes in the jungle perfectly. Nobody does that, especially in Europe. Like, look at the games, right? Like, you have literally zero mid laner that like to play with their jungle aside from Nisqy, and even Nisqy does it like way worse than probably someone like Xiao or Doinb was doing it. So I feel like it is so upsetting for me that you have this guy that can go close to 70% win rate, like it's showmaker level of win rate as a jungle, and play this level of skirmishes on stage, has an off-roll ADC that's better than 90% of the ADCs in EU West, has smashed consistently people facing them in LPL with Doinb, and say, no, he's not good. So it's literally, you have Mbappe, you put him like, you know, midfielder, and you're like, nah, you know, it doesn't do well. Because in our team, we put the number 9 in the midfield, and then we call it a day. So I would accept that he's not the most versatile player, but saying that a non-versatile player is bad, no, he's just non-versatile.
You want to get this one, Thorin?
I mean, put it this way. I actually do think it's a fire take because, like, the obvious angle is this. People simultaneously tell me Bo sucks, but then they also agree his teammates all suck. So which is it? Like, if I'm imagining this world, imagine a world where last year Bo comes into the league, but he's not playing on Vitality. He's playing on G2. Bro, you don't think he would have just tortured the whole league with all the winning lanes? He would have destroyed, like, the joke is he'd probably be the MVP because you'd all vote him MVP. He'd win the first 10 minutes every time. Like, I actually don't think it's a terrible take. Obviously, the problem is people are going to go mad because he hasn't done it in the officials in LEC, so they're going to think it doesn't count. What do you think, Kira? Come on.
Right, I'm going to tell you why. Okay, so I have literally watched all of Bo's career, even the dog shit stuff back in LDL, right? Okay, now I knew Bo was a skilled player because you can get the pro views and it's for games in LDL as well, right? He's a mega skilled player, right? But here's why that's up. Because Bo was not doing that in LDL. Then he joins Doinby and fucking critically crisp as well, right? And all of a sudden, this guy's just the messiah. And if you watch the pro views, he's being pinged around the map like Minesweeper. Like, Jesus fucking Christ, is he being told what to do? Now, you can't tell, because you obviously have not got voice comms, but Doinby and Crisp are literally pinging exactly. And then you see Doinby starting to move. He's like a shark with blood in the water, and he moves in, and he starts farming up, and he's on Olaf, and he gets all those insane gold leads. And you know what? There isn't that many players that if you gave him the gold lead would be as good as he is. But you've seen it that he is deficient in so many other ways that he requires like a Doinby and a Crisp for some strange reason to make effective decision making from in comp. The second reason is when he came to like Europe, I am like sympathetic to a lot of his period. The Vitality period, he has like a bunch of like good and bad. It's like a more of a mixed tunnel. But by the time he's in like K Corp, now I do not think Sakin is a good player, but there are literal game sections where like Sakin has Prio and Tristana, and Bo just thinks he can get both scuttles. For I don't know if he just thinks that other like players like not in the server. It's like there's no version of the game you're playing in which like that can be true. And it's like rather than getting the correct reset and going top to fix Cabo's lane because he's in a counter, he then is late to top. The other person gets a reset and is beaten there first. It's like there isn't a set of conditions where that's correct jungling. So you either know that that's like what you have to do, or you don't. And I can be critical of it. So in a skill sense, like Bo is like in a shortlist of one of the most like skilled players as well. That by the way, that year of LDL was nuts. It was like Bo, Jun, and Aki. By the way, like it was a crazy fucking year of LDL junglers, and they're all mega skilled in different ways. But he has actually, for me, he has got a fucking like a problem in terms of like decision making, and particularly by the way, decision making under pressure. Like in the context of like if you have like a Baron or like a Dragon set up, and he sees like an engage or something, he'll like snap, like take it, even if his like team aren't in like positions for it. Now again, he doesn't speak English all that well. I'm sympathetic to that, but I've seen so much of it now. I'm not even one of those folks, like, I agree with Thorn. He could be great on, like, a great team, because it would, like, make up for a lot of his deficiencies. But I think it's way too colorized in terms of, like, what I've seen, what he thinks was, like, good decision-making and, like, on a bad team. And it's, like, not even just desperation plays, it's just, like, I don't even know what you would call it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as I say, he's not versatile. So if you put him in a control environment where he has to make, like, I would say, rational decisions based on tempo, and he has to play conservative, he doesn't know how to play without a lead. I think that's a player that's obviously a diamond in the rough, because you have the skill. Like the most important skill in League of Legends is fighting. Like if you're able to contest space and not die, pretty much you're going to be better. You look at like all the leading teams in the history of the game, it always falls back to like fighting. I think that's why T1 had so many like leading seasons, just because they're so good at contesting space. But I give you the point of like him probably needing to learn a lot, but I still feel like it is impossible that someone that plays that well the game at the core, like they're champions and moving like arena mode, and just bad because like making the decision of not going on 2 scuttles when you don't have prio is really a toddler choice, right? So you're gonna tell me, oh yeah, the coaches in Europe haven't been able to make him understand and adapt. Sure, and I think that's normal. Saying he's not able to do it, I think is an overstatement by a landslide, and I think we should literally give him the benefit of the doubt. I still want to see him play. Like, he probably will never play. It's probably like one of the lost, like Dopa in the list of these guys that we'll never see. But I think that he's one of these guys that could have been it and will probably never be, because some careers are destroyed by a rough start, and I think that has been like kind of it for him. But I still think that if you watch him play and watch him shot call, as a jungle, I watched enough to say that if you have a jungle that cuts enemy jungle, skirmish him to death, takes 2 of his camps, dive the bot lane, go back, catch him again, dive the bot lane again, and then goes into official games and is literally just invading without prio, there is something that's wrong. Because it means that he has the perfect instincts, and then you put it into a logical framework where he has to like play by rules, and the guy is completely lost. So there is some work to be done. But saying that he's bad, I think is really like terrible. And I think that because he fights so well, he has all the potential to be one of the best in the world. Maybe he isn't, and maybe it's an overstatement, but I think that the fighting skill is always the ceiling of all the best players. Like you look at Jankos, the brain is 300 IQ, but the fighting is, in China, it would be a 4 out of 10. And that's the problem. Like if he goes to China and plays, he's going to get out-skirmished because it's just 5 versus 5 at grubs, and whoever is the best at fighting is going to win. So Bo would thrive in such an environment. I don't think that like a very well calculated decision is going to do anything for the players that can't fight at the end of the day.
I would even say that's also why I think the LPL, sadly, was the best place for him. Because in the LPL, they will take mega talents like that and just keep swapping you around until you get to the team where it makes sense. So it's not just that it had to be Doinby or people who wanted to be Nisqy. Remember, he tried it with Perks. That's a pretty good angle to try it with, a mid lane that can help you. The obvious one he never got a chance to try with because he's retired is, I think someone like Nuke Duck could have been fucking brilliant with this guy. He's another guy where every jungler just starts to figure out his patterns and his roams and when he can play and when he has prio, when he don't, and when he can invade. So I think people like these who have like a bit of a didactic method would help someone like that. But I also agree, the reason why the LPL one's so obvious is, bro, that's exactly why the LPL is a mystery to foreigners. Because what happens is they watch it and they go like, but how could Jun ever be replaced by Wei? Wei's way worse than Jun. You're right. But the joke is, Jun was allowed to just be a guy who was, like Bo, is a monster for the first 15 minutes, and then he can just taper off. Because we win the game in the old BLG. They used to just win every fucking game like 22 minutes or something. So at that point, that worked. Well, by the way, when that didn't work anymore, they didn't go, hey, Jun, you got like a few months. They go, get the fuck out, you can't play anymore. And they just brought in Wei, who's a way worse jungler, but he plays the style that works for them now. They've managed to like readapt and reintegrate the lineup, and now the strengths are back again, and they look fucking awesome. I think if you took this guy over there again, like Milky Way, you just put him on a not that good team and then keep moving players around, you'll find the mix eventually. Because that's the other problem is it's kind of like what happened with Dardoch in NA. Like, I don't think I have some genius eye test, but for me, from day one I saw that guy, I was like, bro, yeah, everyone has to keep trying with this guy. He's just so much better than all the native NA talents. Like, it's not a troll. If you put him on Lee Sin, he'll just create like 4 ganks that no one else even saw in the game. So that player, it's like, look, if it doesn't work in my team, if I'm the next team, give me a try. Let me have a go with him and let me see if I can put him with the right support or the right coach. To me, Bo is that sort of talent where the difference is in the LPL, they've got enough teams, they'd figure it out. The LEC, the problem is we gave him 2 chances and one of them was that fucking shit Carmine Corp lineup. Like, that's brutal. Like, that can't be the end of your career after that. Come on. There's got to like be another team out there who's willing to try. Because if not, I can already tell you what's going to happen. It'll just be like all those players everyone thinks failed, but they don't follow the career. I keep telling people, are you guys aware that Vikla still plays? He's in the LPL. Yeah, I know you guys don't. You go, Vikla, didn't he suck on Fly? Yeah, he did. He fucking sucked on FlyQuest, didn't he? He fed all up. But I tell you what, he's already way better back in the LPL. The way better player. So to me, if it doesn't work for Bo in Europe, but at the moment, I agree with you, it doesn't sound like anyone's going to take a chance on him, unfortunately. And the players who he needed to vouch for him, by the way, were people like Perks and Upset, who don't really have a lot of say in who their teammates are right now. Maybe he has to go home, but he could be so good in the LPL. Because if you think about it, the LPL jungle is fucking a hands roll. There's 2 players. There's the player who plays for the team, and they're the bitch, or there's the player who's just hands, and those players are fucking insane. Like, even the ones who got memed on back in the day, mate, MLXG he can start fucking typing 8,000 APM anytime he wants to. It's half his problem is doing that all the time. They're not the brain jungler region, so I do think he could definitely go back and be a star in the LPL, even though everyone thinks he failed in the West. It's sad, actually. Do we have one more take?
Oh, just to add on one thing like that, it's unfortunate that he did actually just miss both the jungler whisperers just because of the direction that, like, in terms they miss like Home and Tabi, who can just turn any mechanical jungler into just like a macro god. Like, Kanavi would not have been Kanavi without Home. He was just a misguided like macro player. You can go watch the original games. Like, he's literally taking farm off his laners. Like, the guy. So like, it is unfortunate in that sense that his life could have had a very different direction.
Do we have one more take? Is there one more to finish up with?
I'm doing mine.
I'll hit you on one last one, Thorn. Okay, right. It's another historical one, but I really do genuinely believe it, right? If TSM had got out of that fucking group at Worlds, they would have been a Worlds finalist in 2016. The TSM team with the Samsung Galaxy and RNG, because they would have drawn, like, the way the groups would have worked, they would have drawn into H2K at C9 and then H2K, and then they would have been in World Finals versus like T1 on their side of the bracket. And 100% they could have won that bracket because they would have been in Samsung SSG's position instead. And I'm telling you, they could have been in the finals instead of that. And people do not want to hear that. And they would have been like the first Western team to make a World Final. Right. And that's the difference a BO1 against RNG can make in like history, because one group game loss and a double lift Lucian E later, right? What they call it, and history is completely marked differently because that team was genuinely good. And here, you think I'm coping? Go back, you can even check. Kelsey Moser has them as the second best team at the tournament over like Rocks Tigers and stuff. She's got them as the second best team. So like there was like genuine things, but nobody. Not a person would ever look at that TSM team and be like, greatest Western team, like
of course.
best Western team in 2016. Like no one like thinks about it like that, and that obviously that reason. But genuinely believe it, because if you go look at the matchups, like I think all those teams are beatable. Like they've just beat C9. Like, and beating C9 was literally their job for like two, 3 splits. They had literally never lost to them. That's not to say they wouldn't lose to them at Worlds, but if you know how the bot lane matchup works, they were getting annihilated. And then H2K, now that one's a bit like trickier. H2K were on the rise, but you know, Bjergsen was in unbelievable form and Ryu wasn't. Like, Bjergsen's the only person that beat Crown at that World Championship, not called Faker. He's the only guy that beat him at that tournament, and he absolutely smashed him both times. Like, in lane. So, everyone, like, talks about, like, Crown, unbelievable mechanics, unbelievable. And, like, Bjergsen was... That was peak of his powers, Bjergsen. He just had an unlucky team experience.
You're smoking, man. You're smoking. I'm sorry, I've been very nice, but like this one is no, it's. I mean, I feel like the first H2K was just a much better team. I think overall. I mean, they still got the best of many teams. I'm looking at the record, right? Yeah, they did 1-1 against right. Yeah, it was no. In groups, it was against Edward Gaming, and this team was really good back then. It was Corwan, Clearlove, Pound, and Scout. And Deft, right? There was these players. So they already played amazing. I think that with the confidence they had, I don't think that anyone would have beaten H2K. And the Samsung Galaxy, there is 0% chance, man. They literally like this is the biggest like copium I've ever seen. Like,
he means if he beat them in the group, though, to get out, not in the best of 5. He means in the group.
And then, they were winning. They beat Samsung Galaxy in one game, right? And then they were winning the next game, and then Double Lift like emptied that, right?
But then they would have faced SKT. No, if they take the position of RNG, they're facing SKT. So they would have done nothing.
They would have taken the position of Samsung Galaxy. Like, because if they had beaten Samsung Galaxy twice, like, they would have taken their position in their group. Okay. And they would have went out of the group.
Because of the group draw. Okay. No, I can see clearly through the smoke. So, a little bit less because, they can beat C9, and you can say it's a tie versus H2K, and then it would have been World Finals. I mean, I leave it to Thorin because Thorin's gonna say, "But they didn't," and that's it. That's a.
By the way, it is plausible, but the problem is, notice you again did create the most bullshit Worlds bracket of all time. You made a bracket of Worlds which is H2K ANX and then C9 TSM. Like, spoiler, that is the only way you could have had TSM in the finals. But I'll also say as well, to be fair, like if you actually do look at that bracket too. Like, they would, but the difference is they would never in 1 million years win the final, though. Like, they would absolutely 100% probably get 3-0 smoked by T1 complete. I will say, though, the reason that would have been insanely hype, but it didn't happen, is, bro, you would have had Jensen versus Bjergsen in the quarterfinals in a BO5. Can you even imagine the viewership that would have had? That would have, like, been fucking bonkers. Because that is still, to this day, the saddest thing about fucking Worlds. Is that, except for that one time when Fnatic played Cloud9 in Season 8, you never fucking get the playoff matchup. Like, all we ever needed was like a Fnatic TSM or something, in like quarters. That would have like broken all the Western viewership records. So I know what you mean. It's not impossible. It's also because, a bit like when you made fucking Humanoid the best LEC player. Yeah, over like the worst month of LEC ever or something. Yeah, you're right. So you are using that logic, as they say in America. It's like being the prettiest Denny's waitress. It's like at the end of the day, you are just a waitress in Denny's, mate. Now get me my fucking pancakes or whatever that shit they serve there. Fried eggs. It's not a fucking, it's not Gucci catwalk, is it? It's not like It's just fucking some ugly mid-ass waitress or...
Hey,
yeah.
and remember, we got the leaked scrums, and all I'm going to say is there's 3 leaked scrums, and TSM won one of them. That's all I'm going to say. You know what I mean? Even the Mighty T1 was beatable in the Korean scrum environment and by TSM, you know? That definitely means the finals wasn't implausible, you know?
Obviously, the obvious joke here is don't let Amazing hear that, because he'd be like, you've got the wrong year, we were going to go to finals. Yeah. There you go, that's the meme in it. We got him on the wrong one.
Amazing, just sitting on the empty seat. Say it, 2014.
Yeah, no, the joke is, as you said, they could have gone to finals. Like, yeah, season 6. I wasn't even on the team then. Exactly, no, you got him on that.
No,
one.
the hot take for that one was they shouldn't have even made it out of groups. It took Sven Skeren being a TSM player earlier in his career.
Exactly.
Make sure they got out of groups, yeah.
Exactly. All I'm saying is that feels like some shit where like Kyle Reese, aka Bjergsen's like time brother, just came out like, look, it's the only way you ever make playoffs. Tell Sven Skeren to write this. And there you go, it's Danish match. Next thing you know, TSM top 8 due to pure toxicity only.